Hey everybody, it's Richard Chapman and Mike Myers, and welcome to this week's episode of Two Bald Nerds. So Richard, it's all EDR this episode, right?
It is. It's all EDR. We're going to spend some time in two different EDR solutions that we've talked about in the past. We hinted at spending a little bit of time in it last time. We gave a little bit of a teaser. Today we're going to dive deep, actually show you what it is that you can do as a cybersecurity professional.
That's right. So if you don't know what EDR stands for, endpoint detection and response, right?
That is correct.
So, but more importantly, watch our previous Two Bald Nerds video where we really introduced the concept of EDR. So if you haven't seen that, you might want to go ahead and pause this and head back, watch that episode, and then come on back. So, Richard, I would say that EDR is not only common in enterprise solutions, it's downright required. How do you feel about that statement?
Personally, I agree with both of those statements. It is pretty standard in most SOCs and definitely a requirement. It's important to see the endpoint activity for sure.
So I've always been curious about, because EDR is really one of those you ain't in Soho anymore kind of worlds, right? I mean, yes. So I'd be curious what the evolutionary process is. We're sitting here, we've got an office and we have our individually installed anti-malwares and all that. But then one day, I guess it has to do with something like when you get your first chief information security officer or the first tech guy or something like that. It's like, we're big enough. We can do this a lot easier and a lot cheaper. And then that's when EDR comes into play.
Well, I also think it's visibility also. It's one thing to have like an antivirus or an anti-malware that does what it does, right? But to be able to understand where it came from, analyze the activities of the user that was on the machine, that's really where the bread and butter is, because as analysts, we need to understand where this stuff is coming from and how we can defend against it.
So we, one of the things we talked about this week is we're going to be looking at very specific EDR solutions. Are we going to be doing from one vendor or two or 10, or what's the plan for today?
Yeah, so we have two different vendors. I've actually got a couple of different alerts that I'm going to share. And what we'll do is we'll take a look. We'll dive into the alert as an analyst would and kind of, work through the process and take some of the steps that you would as either as an EDR analyst or as just a regular SOC analyst doing investigations on these endpoints.
Cool. So what's the first one we're going to do then?
So we're going to spend some time in CrowdStrike, which happens to be one of my favorites. I alluded to that last time. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to start with CrowdStrike. Right now, I'm currently on our SOC landing page. Again, as an analyst, this is where they first land when they connect to our network. And once that happens, I would generally pop over here to my CrowdStrike link to go look at my EDR. This is my main dashboard of CrowdStrike. And it gives you kind of an overview of what's going on in the environment. And what I would most of the time do is give it a look-see, see if there's anything that stands out to me. This is something that always is an important component, new detections. So right now I have 4 new detections that I can go and investigate. And I've already picked out a detection that we're going to look at. So what I would normally do is click on this nice big 4. And that would take us to our detections here. And there's 4 different detections on the screen. The one we're going to play with today is probably the least important one on the dashboard. But we're gonna focus on that one at the moment. So when I click on that, this tells me a lot of information. I can see the date and the time that the alert was triggered. I can see the host machine, the user. I can also see kind of the processes that occurred that led to the alert. This cool little yellow badge here, which is indicating a low level alert, is still letting me know that some activity took place. And we got a detection from CrowdStrike because of these activities. Hey, Mike, it's March, right?
Yep.
All right. Isn't March Madness like this month, like the whole basketball bracketing and everything?
It is.
It kind of looks like a March Madness bracket.
Fan like me, I'm rooting for University of Houston, but we'll see.
Okay. All right, I have to root for Florida State. My wife is alumni, and I'm a Florida State fan as well too. So I don't even know if they're going to make it, but whatever. Anyways, this kind of looks like bracketing. So maybe we should take a bet on whether we think this file here is malicious or not. What do you think?
Well, it's actually unfair because I have some familiarity with this type of stuff.
Oh, it's a 50-50 guess though.
I guess, you know,
Well, in any case, we can see the processes that actually led to this file, this oinstall.exe. And to me, when I look at this, it sounds kind of like an installation file. I think you'd probably agree with that, wouldn't you, Mike? Install.exe, yeah, of some sort. What we don't know is what exactly is it? And one of the main ways that we can tell if a file is malicious or not is by its signature, which easily enough is known as a hash. And we can take that hash and click on this link here, VirusTotal, and it'll actually take us right to VirusTotal, which is an open source intelligence tool that we teach you how to use as well. And actually anybody can use this. Mike, you can use this when you get a file and you want to see if it's malicious. You can actually use VirusTotal on your own. If you have a virtual environment, open your...
I'm actually familiar with this one. What worries me here is that make sure people understand, folks, you generate a hash on any bit of binary data, files and such like that. So hashes are very, very, very unique. So this website will take a copy of a hash. It doesn't need that whole oinstall file, it just needs the hash. And then this way people can look at it, and folks like Richard and I can sit there and go, oh, based on this hash, 37 security vendors and one sandbox flagged this as malicious.
Exactly right. I couldn't have explained that any better, Mike. Are you sure you haven't been working in a SOC?
No, but I've been teaching computing for a little bit. Just a wee bit.
First off, Mike's exactly right. 37 different security vendors, and some of them are probably well known. You may be familiar. You know, we got McAfee, Palo Alto, Sophos, Microsoft. I mean, we can definitely see some big cybersecurity companies have flagged this as bad, and we can see a couple different mentions here: Riskware, Hacktool, potentially unwanted application, pretty consistent there. PUP. So potentially unwanted program is really what this is appearing to be, and we can look more at the details here. And we actually have a sandbox report from Joe Sandbox, which is pretty cool. And you can actually take that sandbox link and go and really dig into the details of what that file would do. And, you know, understanding how these activities occur, you were asking earlier about, you know, the evolution of EDR. You know, this is the big thing, understanding how these malicious files are actually working, how the threat actors are taking the steps that they're taking to be able to get into our systems. And that's where EDR shines, in my opinion, because it gives us a lot of insight. And when you start doing investigations on some of these, you can really kind of dig into that, which is cool. But
what's also interesting to me here is that this thing was doing a scan of a file on a user's desktop on an individual computer. You know, so many times when I think of anti-malware, I think of them watching incoming email, incoming or outgoing traffic, and, you know, using signatures to come up with stuff. In this case, it almost seems more like it scanned a system.
So are you talking about this image right here?
No. If you go back to the original incident that you were showing me, it said that the file, here, look down at the bottom, associated file.
Yep.
And it says it found something on a user's desktop, blind user whack desktop. So I'm assuming that it found this through a scan or something.
Well, remember last week we talked about the agent. That agent is monitoring the activity on these machines all the time. So if you download something, if you plug in a thumb drive, I mean, there's different, obviously, ways that this happens, but when those activities present themselves, especially malicious ones, the hashes make it easy to identify, because you go, that's a bad file, right? It's like recognizing a weapon. When you see a weapon, you're like.
So the agent detected a file download, and that set it off to check out the file, probably then.
Really, that's kind of an easy way to look at it. And again, it's easy to see that this is malicious based on VirusTotal. So that's kind of an easy detection, right? In that case, we can actually explore further. But one of the things that I would tell you as an analyst, if I saw this and I check this out and realize that it's malicious, the first thing that I'm going to do is go, well, how come no action was taken? And at that point, I know, because no action was taken for some reason on this device, I would 100% want to make sure that I am containing the host. So as an analyst, I have the ability to disconnect this device using that agent to disconnect this device from the network so it can't communicate with any other device in the environment. That helps to consolidate and or compartmentalize that activity and keep it from spreading to other machines. So it's a lot of power actually to be able to do that. I'm sure if you've heard about the US Marshals got hacked recently and they were able to isolate it to one machine. So, this could be a situation similar to that where it shows up on that one machine. And the SOC analyst who originally saw the detection was quickly able to contain that host, which isolated it to that machine. Pretty powerful stuff. And as an analyst, we get to do that, which is nice. But we could dive into the command line, which obviously is telling us a little bit how that application worked. We can look at the file path, which tells us where that file was located on the machine. I mean, there's a bunch of different things that we can do, but right off the bat, the first thing I would do is contain this host because there's a malicious file that's absolutely on this host machine while that user, blind user was using this device. So this is a compromised host at the moment, and I would absolutely handle that in that way. Now, what's nice is being able to dig into root cause analysis. So Mike asked me, what's root cause analysis?
Hey, Richard, what's root cause analysis?
So it's important to know where it came from. And again, when we were talking about the evolution of antivirus into EDR and things like that, that's a big component of it. Being able to dig into the host, I clicked too fast here. I can actually do what's called a host search. And based on this alert, once I've contained that host, then I can go to a host search and I can dive into the activities of that machine at that time. So for instance, this did a search looking at all of the activity on that endpoint. Look at some of the information. You got your host info, BIOS information. Let's see, you've got user activities over the last 7 days. Then you get into processes and services that are running on the machine. You can also see any command line history, command line and admin tools, PowerShell activities, which, as you know, PowerShell, even though it's a legitimate application, can be used maliciously. And then suspicious file activity. So CrowdStrike is also looking at suspicious file activity. So you can dive into these different things, scripts written, executable activities are being run. Even registry tasks and firewall changes. Here's scheduled tasks are a big one as well too. A lot of malicious files, if they get a foothold on a machine, they'll traditionally schedule some tasks to do different things. And that can be whether it's on the machine restart or even at a later date. I read an article about a threat that's kind of being used pretty heavily right now called MiloBot, and it sits on the machine for 14 days. So that is absolutely creating a scheduled task to 14 days later carry out an activity. That makes it a little bit tougher to be able to find out exactly where and when the original activity came from. Because what we want to know is, where did the malicious file come from? It's one thing to have a malicious file on the machine. It's another thing to understand where it came from. And sure. I can see that there's some activity here. Calendar trigger, Microsoft Office, that might be something that I'd want to investigate. I can see different network connections, and actually looking right around that same time frame, a little before, we can see that there was some activity here that is a little bit suspicious in my opinion. And actually, if you check that IP address actually shows up as low-level malicious. Now, it is a Microsoft block of IPs, but Microsoft does host, they do cloud hosting, right? So somebody could absolutely be using this as a file repository for a malicious file. It was somehow compromised. But this is the fun things that you get to do when you're figuring out these EDR alerts. And it's a lot more than saying, hey, there's a virus on the machine. It's digging in.
But the important thing here, Richard, is that, you're being taught this in the CyberNow Labs course, right?
Absolutely, 100%. Our analysts are doing this in our environment. They're actually looking at machines that have EDR agents installed on them, exactly like my machine that's sitting right in front of me. And if I go do something malicious, it's going to create an alert, and my analysts are analyzing that. which is pretty amazing. They're absolutely doing hands-on real life stuff here, which is cool.
But more than that, not only are you doing this within a classroom environment, you're actually given office hours.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
And so on your copious spare time, you can take a shift, and you even then someone's helping you though, right? And when you're sitting in on a shift on the SOC.
Yeah, so what we try to do is we build our shifts so that our people actually have real shifts that they work. They're doing real SOC shifts. They're communicating with each other. They're reading cyber intelligence news. They're listening to podcasts and news blurbs and things like that while they're doing their work as well. But they're also working with usually a SOC shift lead, which is usually someone that's a little more advanced, or a mentor from a previous cohort. And then, final escalation, it can come to me as the SOC manager, and then I can, give my 2 cents, go through the investigation with them, help clarify things as well. And again, that gives them a tier system to escalate. It gives them the ticketing system to do exactly what an analyst does. So these are not simulations. These are real. This is real network traffic in our real environment and real activities that are occurring. All right, Mike. So what did you think about that? How did you enjoy that investigation? Was it fun?
I think obviously, like that particular example you gave of a particularly malicious executable is fascinating. But I got to tell you, what was more important to me was to understand that part of the CyberNow Labs course is to not only run this tool, but actually do a full-blown legitimate investigation. So that was important to me. And I'll probably want to dive more into this shift time when you're on the shift. But that might be its own episode, to be honest with you. So, Richard, I know we had one more. What was the other one we wanted to do?
Sentinel One, and maybe we need to do another EDR episode, and we can go through an alert there. What do you think?
I think that's the way to do it. That allows us to have enough drill down time without boring everybody to death. So we'll come back and we'll do Sentinel One next week. How does that grab you?
Sounds like a plan. I love it. Let's do it again. All
right, folks, this is Mike Myers, and that's Richard Chapman. We're two bald nerds deep in the land of EDR. Check out CyberNow Labs. Always got a link somewhere around here for you to check out. Until then, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. If you like Two Bald Nerds, check out our entire playlist right here. It's a lot of fun. We'll see you there.